My name is Scott Miller. I lead the consulting part of the organization for InSource and SiteBridge, if you're familiar with that name. Kind of exciting morning. Had a little bit of introduction in terms of what InSource is representing itself as today as we grow and work in manufacturing, as well as you get to see some of the work that we're doing around how to demonstrate some of the things that are going on, how to leverage some of the tools that we have to show you what the technology can and can't do. I want to take just a little bit of a step back. There may be some people that are joining us on the web event at this point that might have missed some of the stuff this morning. So I want to take just a moment and recap a little bit of what that was. So I'll do a little bit of a recap, then we're going to kick into the keynote. The gentleman from Snyder's Lance is going to be jumping in and presenting for you today. Rob started this morning with talking about when improvements are done in organizations, what we find generally is they don't last. Unfortunately, not enough time is spent in looking at the details such that they actually last over time. And you typically get something like this, where a lot of time or money is spent in putting an improvement in place. You see a temporary benefit as a result of that. And then over time, it might fade a little bit, but then we're going to go do something else. We're going to jump on the next improvement, whether it's a technology opportunity or a process opportunity or something we're doing with our people. There's all kinds of opportunities that are out there, but typically what's happening is we're seeing some benefit, but it's not, the foundation isn't there for it to grow over time. We lead this slide with technology alone is not enough, but more importantly, really, it's not that technology alone is not enough. That's sort of the perspective we're bringing to the table because historically we've been a technology company. In reality, it's that people alone are not enough, and process alone are not enough, and technology alone is not enough. And it comes down to the need to focus on what does it matter, what do we do to be able to create disciplined execution in the organization? What do we have to do to ensure that the people, process, and technology elements that we spend so much time and effort putting in place are actually used and adopted in the term that Rob used, become routine, become part of what we do day to day. And back to that slide that he talked about, we spend a lot of time building those improvements, trying to get to that next level of performance, if you will. And a lot of organizations do standardization. That was sort of the vogue for many years. We've got to go standardize. We've got to create the standards for people, put the procedures in place, make sure they know what to do. But the next step really is to turn it into how does this affect me day to day? How do we turn this into something that I do without necessarily thinking about it? It becomes how I do what I do. How do I make it routine? And in reality, people gravitate toward manufacturing because they like the routines. They don't like change necessarily, which is a problem because when you go to introduce change in manufacturing, if they don't like change, how do you get that through? How do you move to that next level? And a lot of times the organizations don't really spend sufficient time in understanding the elements that are required from a process and a people perspective to make sure those technologies that Kevin and these guys were showing you are actually leveraged effectively inside the organization. Rob mentioned there's this energy or work that's undermining all the time. Manufacturing is a dynamic situation. It's always changing. That's what's kind of cool about it. But it is always changing. And people are always changing. And attitudes are always changing. There's this undermining effect that exists that's not going to go away. It's the entropy from the second law of thermodynamics if you're an engineer. It's always there, and it's always working against you. So you always have to have something that's working and reinforcing on the other side. A technology component, like we were showing you a little while ago, might be the piece that makes it a little more efficient such that people will actually continue to use it as you go forward. But those energy elements involve people as well. It involves people asking the right questions on an ongoing basis to make sure they support what you're after, what you're trying to accomplish in terms of success. Kevin and the team took you through the Learning Lab, kind of showed you what something like that, what it looks like. Many of the folks here, the guys from Snyder's Lance, obviously what we have here is nowhere near the volume or the scope or the scale of a real manufacturing system. But the scenario they presented in a very slow form is exactly what these guys go through every single day, multiple times a day. The requirement to be able to respond. And part of what you're going to see from these guys too is, you know, changeovers are sort of a bad word. Kevin used a great term, it robs time. It robs me from being able to be productive and efficient. So a lot of people like to say, well, cut the change orders. You can't do that. Your customer wants different products. The market is what's driving the demand, which might drive a requirement for additional changeovers. So the concept here is how do we get the processes in place, how do we get our people engaged, and potentially how do we leverage some of these technologies to be able to make them more efficient, more effective. Maybe take some of that reinforcement away from a person having to remember to do it, put it in the hands of the tool that reminds people to do it, or gives them the tools or the data they need to be able to move to the next level. Whether it's a procedure that someone accesses down here in a site-based application, or maybe categorizing and seeing the details of what the events were so I can go back over time and look at and understand how to make a change in the future that's going to make a difference, not just in performance. This is one of the keys that I really like to go back to. An operator's day is a whole lot better when things run smoothly. So if we can figure out how to reduce the number of the events that occur here and make their day run more smoothly, the likelihood of them doing a better job is much better as well. So it's easy to get them engaged in that concept. That concept of maturity, to go back to that for just a moment as well, when we start talking with organizations and engaging with them, there are 4 quadrants that we look at there. And as Rob said, there's nothing wrong with being in paper from a technology perspective. There's nothing wrong with being trained from a people perspective. It comes down to where are you as an organization and what's the appropriate next step to take. It isn't a red light, green light, bad or good. It's a where are you realistically, what are the facts, where do you stand, and where are you trying to go? Where's your business trying to drive you, and how do you translate that into what's of value to the folks that are on the floor, whether it's a supervisor, an associate, or a production manager. And getting to the point where they say, meaning every person in the organization, know what we need to do, we do it consistently over time, and we're able to produce those results. And as Rob said, when we don't, we have a means and a mechanism to ensure that we're able to address that. So this concept of building, it's a nice, perfect picture. Everybody likes to think this is great. You know, at the end of the day, it's nirvana. We can build on every single program. They're all going to be productive. It doesn't happen that way. However, this is really the concept you want to try to build toward, which is how do we get the most out of what we're investing in? How do we get the most out of the people in terms of the changes that we're making? And I have the privilege of introducing some guys that have really spent a lot of time in the organization over the last several years, sort of conceptually going through this process. They're actually going to walk you through several different scenarios of different things they've done, whether it's around problem solving or standard work or putting technology in place, all the things we've talked about today, and what they've done over the last several years to begin to advance their organization and really begin to see these kind of results and sustain them as they go forward. It's my privilege to introduce Andy Hampton, who's the plant manager at Charlotte Bakery, Josh Logan, the packaging operations manager, John Chandler, the continuous improvement manager, and then Matt Greer, who's the plant technical manager. They're going to go through each one of them and walk through a different element that they've been involved in and engaged in and give you a picture of what real life looks like at Snyder's-Lance. So, Andy?
Good morning. My name's Andy Hampton, and you know, the team and I are excited to be here to talk about our transformation. And we've made a lot of great improvements over the last 2.5, 3 years. And you know, what I want you guys to understand is we're not the experts. We're here to talk about some of the building blocks that we've done and that have helped us improve. And by no means are we even in the middle point of our journey. We're just continuing to improve and continuing to get better as we go. So let me tell you a little bit about our agenda and kind of the building blocks that we've used to kind of get us going in the right way and to help start transform our organization. So, you know, I want to talk to you first about our vision. And really our vision is about giving clarity to our leaders and getting strategic priorities out there so we get our sights around it and can move the business forward towards it. Our technology transformation, this is going to be a big piece as Scott and as Rob talked about changeovers and complexities within an organization. How did we change our technology and our people's skill sets to be able to adapt to this new business that marketing was driving for us? So building in reliability. How do we continue to improve sustainability on our equipment? And a lot about what we just talked about and ad-libbed on was tearing down the walls between operations and the reliability teams. How do we become more partners to move the business forward? And then we'll talk a little bit about problem solving, some of the techniques we use to engage our experts on the floor, to get after problems, root cause scenarios, things of that nature to get the business moving forward as well. And then, you know, kind of to wrap that up, the people, the process, and the technology. But as we've been talking about all day today, the leader standard work or standard work for your team, that's that discipline, that's that rigor to drive that stability or sustainability within our program. So that, to me, really leader standard work is the building blocks to more advanced CI systems in the future because it really drives sustainability, really gives you that mechanism to sustain your performance. Before we get into that, I want to talk to you a little bit so you get to know kind of who we are, our site, and tell you a little bit about kind of our business complexities, what drove us to put these building blocks in place to help our transformation. So just a little bit on our overview. We actually have 3 facilities on our site. We have a bakery, which produces the sandwich crackers that everybody sees out in the marketplace, about an 800 square foot facility. And then we have our chip plant. Our chip plant, the primary production is Cape Cod kettle chips. I think everybody's aware of those out in the marketplace as well. And then PCD, our premium cookie department. This is actually recently just shut down. We've actually sold the assets to another company, so we're transitioning that and decommissioning that facility. And then we have an off-site warehouse of about 220,000 square feet. So total, we're about 1.2 million square feet. The bakery was built in 1962. The salty plant was built in the 1970s, about 121 acres. All in, about 850 team members out there, and we do flex up to 150 temporary employees depending on seasonality and things that we have going on in the organization at the time. We are staffed, you know, across the board, anywhere from a 5-day-a-week scenario, you know, Monday through Friday, to A, B, C, D teams, depending on the volume in that particular piece of the organization. So a little bit about the bakery, because that's primarily what we're going to talk about today is, you're seeing a product portfolio here, and in a minute we're going to talk about what's changing or what did change in the complexities that it created in our organization. But again, 800,000 square feet. On any given day, we have about 550 team members, give or take, depending on our volume fluctuations. We do have 7 bakery lines. So when I say a bakery line, I'm talking about an oven, a 200 to 300-foot oven through a process. So our mixing, our cutting and forming of the crackers, our ovens, and then our packaging technology to pack out the product. So 7 major lines that we have in the facility. Then we have some specialty packaging lines. We have a cracker mill line that we do some cracker mill and some crushed items on for food service type of accounts. We have a sunflower seed line where we pack sunflower seeds into small bags, and then we have a variety packaging technology, so new robotic technology that takes our sandwich crackers and puts it in a variety pack. So a lot going on in there. Our average weekly pounds is about 3.5 million pounds, and our portfolio is about 77% branded. So we do majority of our volume is all branded, 20% contract, co-man type of activities, and then 3% private label that you see out there in the stores. So a little bit about our business, pretty large site with a lot going on. And really what prompted us to change the complexities. So if you look at the first building block here, this toast cheese, I'll call it our toast cheese pre-carton environment. We really only had 3 products or package sizes that we ran on our main line. So we ran an 8 count, we ran a 120 count case, which we actually dissected that case into other packs, either at a co-man or on site through a variety system, or a 40 count. So at the time, everything was good, right? We ran toast cheese all the time on major lines, and we could open it up and we could really run. And as we talked about, that's not really reality anymore, right? We need to generate growth. We need to look at different package sizes. We need to look at innovation to continue to grow the brand, reach more consumers. So we started to change. Our business started to change, and we started to get into the closed carton. If you've seen our transition, you've probably seen it on the grocery shelf, where we've gone from the clear overwrap film to a closed carton, almost looks like a granola bar box. We've started to transition into that. So over the previous year and a half, we have completely transitioned our volume. So we're running a closed carton 8 count now, and we're still running our traditional 8 count overwrap for private label for co-man. We've changed our 120 count box to what we call a 180 whip, because we've upgraded our technology and our variety systems to pick and place from a different style box. We've actually put out what we call a 9 count carton that you'll see out in C-stores or gas stations, things of that nature. We've introduced 2 new 20 count boxes that are out there on the shelf or go directly to our vending businesses. And we introduced a 40 count. So a 40 count, or that 40 count still remains the same. So if you think about where we were and where we are now, and this is just one product. So you think about that one product times, 20 different products out there. Our complexity has more than doubled over a year's time. So why do we do that? Again, new packaging. That packaging is like it's the last point where a consumer buys. So you get that impulse buy, right? It's like that shiny new car that you drive by every day on the parking lot or on a car lot and you want to buy it. That same type of thing. So our consumers were telling us new packaging was eye-catching. It was the right thing to do, and marketing continued to drive the business forward for us and the changes. On top of the packaging changes, we started innovation growth as well. So we added 17 new products and 15 new fillers. So the filler in between the 2 crackers, 15 new fillers. So quite a different environment for us year over year as we got into the new business. And why did we do that? We generated that innovation to reach more consumers, to get out there and reach more consumers. So to give you a little bit of a flavor for what it was, up there was what it was in 2012 and 2000, about halfway through 2013. And then the bottom picture here is what it grew to, and it's even grown more since then. So quite a change for us. So what did this mean for us? Why did we have to put those building blocks into place to change? So we created a significant amount of complexity, and I'll be the first to get up here in front of everybody and tell you that we probably weren't ready for those changes the way that we should have been. So it created a lot of chaos for us, not only our leaders, but also our team members on the floor that were helping us improve the business. So it created inventory issues, space constraints, handling, code management date. When you make a variety pack and you put the oldest product in, you got to change all your code dates to match that. So we were doing all sorts of new scenarios with new technology out there that we might have been ready for in some cases, but might not have been in other cases. Our material transition, so you think about a change of this scope, your write-off risks that you have as you transition out of one material and into a new material, the dollars that are involved in that. And then when I look at, you know, the biggest thing that we'll talk about is our changeover losses. So our changeovers year over year were up 90%. So long were the days of running toast chi all day. I mean, we've all probably been in an organization where you could open up a production line and run it for a week straight, that same product. I would love to say that we could do that every single day because it would make our lives a lot easier, but that's not the market conditions out there. That's not what consumers are wanting. They're wanting new and different things every day. So we were changing, right? And you're going to see this picture throughout my presentation, and to me, this represents chaos, right? This was at our doorstep, and we knew that we had to change. We knew we had to do something different. We had to open up the front door and step out and transform our organization. So let's talk about really the first thing that we did, our vision. Right, our vision, we had to get it out there to provide clarity to our team members, provide clarities to our leaders, and provide strategies. Where were we going? What was our strategies? What was going to be our fundamentals, and how are we going to move forward? So I want to talk to you a little bit about our vision, because this is really where we started. So the Charlotte site, the bakery, the chip plant, the cookie plant, is on a path to become unquestionably the best site in the snack food industry. So we're setting that target out there. We want to be the best every day at everything that we do. That's our goal. And this is our house. You're going to see this quite a bit. Our house, our future. If you come into the plant, if you ever go on a plant tour, you will see this everywhere. It's what we talk about every single day, and our team members know it. It's our house. We own it. No one has a greater influence on our house or our future than we do. So if you think about that, to me, this is all about the ownership. So every week or every 2 weeks when I get into a new hire orientation, I talk about this quite a bit. I talk about the ownership, the engagement, the empowerment that you are able to have in this organization. I can't move this organization forward by myself. I need everybody in this room to have an equal stake in moving the business forward. Everybody has a say in what we do, so have ownership in that. So from there, the Our House, Our Future, we created what we call our strategic pillars. A lot of folks will use a traditional lean house or a TPM house. What we did is we kind of carved that out. We made it very simple so team members could relate to it on the floor, and we could really adapt our programs to our folks on the floor. I want you to pay particular attention to the foundation of the house, right? Those are our values. Those are our vehicles, and we live by these values every day. We're very passionate about it. They're the vehicles that help us get results. They help drive the strategic initiatives that we do. So we'll talk a little bit about strengthening people, building on quality, spending wisely, and home improvement. What do those mean? We won't spend a significant amount of time on it, but strengthening people. You know, people are our foundation. They are the vehicle and the means at which we get work done, and that's where we need to put the majority of our resources, time, effort, tools, and the ability to grow them and develop them so they can function at their best every single day. So what strategic initiatives are we going to use to strengthen our people? Spend wisely, right? Simply put, this is our commitment to the organization. This is all about meeting our KPIs and getting better every day. So, you know, watch what we spend. Are we getting the return on investment? Every time we make an investment, are we getting the return that we thought we would? I always use the example of, you know, before we came up with this strategy, I used to use 3 paper towels to dry my hands off in the bathroom. And then we looked at our financial statements and we realized, I can't believe how much money we spend on our paper towels. You know, so every time I go in there today, I get 1 paper towel to dry off my hands. So it's just simple things, you know, spending wisely that you can relate to the floor and talk about every day with your team to help them understand the impact of financials, results, things of that nature, our commitment to the organization. So building on quality, I mean, it really means exactly what it says, right? Our site demonstrates quality in all that we do, and traditionally, everybody talks about their product being the benchmark quality product out there in the marketplace, and we do believe in that, right? That's what we believe in, that's what we strive for every day, but we wanted to take it one step farther and talk about the quality of our work, right? So how do we create good quality work? How do we work smarter, not harder? How do we create sustainable process? Everybody probably lives this out there in the manufacturing organizations, that tribal knowledge. I heard the team talk about it earlier. Our plant was built on tribal knowledge. Our plant was built on tribal knowledge. So building on quality, or how do we build sustainable processes and sustainable work for the future? Because when this team's gone, the business has got to continue to move forward. And then last but not least, home improvement. What do we do around home improvement? So we're going to make the necessary improvements so our plant stands the test of time. That's our legacy, is to leave this plant in better shape than when we came into it and to set it up for the next 50 years and the next generations to come, because our plant supports a major part of the Charlotte community. And then investing back into our reliability processes. How do we sustain what we're doing in the future? So to kind of wrap that up, really our vision was about providing clarity and giving our teams and our leaders something to rally around. And we use this picture quite a bit, is, before we created this vision, here's where we were. We were in muddy water. We didn't understand where we're going. And now we've got a strategic vision and strategies that are going to help drive us forward to some clarity. That's really how we set it up and really how we set the foundation of our pillars up to continue to move the business forward. With that, I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Josh to talk a little bit about our technology transformation.
So I'm going to talk about one of the capital projects that we undertook at the Charlotte Bakery. And I think you've probably seen this term if you've been paying attention on a few of the slides. We called it Project Crayola. And that's probably the number one questions we get asked is, why do we call it Crayola? Well, it really started, it was a name that stuck. When we undertook the project to convert from an overwrap tray to a closed carton, one of the initial ideas was the Crayola crayon box. So that, for whatever reason, that name stuck. None of the other ideas stuck, even though we went away from that original design. But that's why we call it Crayola. So as you see that coming through a few of these slides, that's what we're referring to. So again, as Andy mentioned, we had there was a mission given to us, basically convert that overwrap tray that everyone was so familiar with, take that, put it into a closed carton that we felt gave us some differentiation on the shelf, kind of was a billboard on itself on the shelf. Looks a little bit more premium. So we spent a lot of money updating our equipment to give us that capability. As part of that, yes, it was a sales and marketing driven project and the technology behind it, but from a plant standpoint, we wanted to use that as an opportunity to really help improve our situation based on the changing market conditions. So as part of that, we use that. We have a system that was very linear in design, and actually I'll skip ahead a little bit. This is the example we always use. Our old system really was what we consider almost like a series circuit. So if you think of a production line, as Andy said, you have the mixing area, the cutting area, all the way through packaging. And as you go through packaging, everything was set up in that series type format. So if something at the end of the line went down, if a case packer goes down, everything upstream would stop. So whether we were changing over the line or whether we had some reliability issues, that created a situation for us where it resulted in scrap. And the analysis I always try to give people with understanding the bakery is, Andy mentioned, these are 200, 300-foot ovens. They're massive. There's thousands of pounds an hour coming out of these ovens. And if we do a 30-minute changeover, there's nowhere for that volume to go except into a scrap bin. So we took this opportunity to redesign the way we think about our business and convert more to this, what we call a parallel circuit. So if we have some reliability issues on a part of the line, we can divert volume. If we want to do a changeover, we built in that redundancy into the system, which gave us the ability to take parts of the line down to go from those 3 formats to those 7 or 8 formats or 10 formats that we have now without experiencing that loss and helping us reduce our changeover loss. So as part of that, technology is obviously a key component to helping us reduce that. As you've heard a couple times today, we feel probably the most important part of that is leveraging and engaging our team on the floor. So as part of this project that we undertook, we reached out, before we ever started to kick off the project, we reached out to a lot of the key people on the floor who run the current system and tried to seek that input from them on what do you guys need? If you could have anything, what would you want? And we call them a black hat team, but we engaged that team from the beginning. They were involved in every aspect from design. They traveled to all the different vendors to test the equipment. Made recommendations as we went through the project on, hey, maybe if we could do this, it'd be even better. And really what we felt like that helped us give is, so we have all this technology we spent a lot of money on, but at the end of the day, we have a team that has ownership and buy-in into that. And so now when we walk away from it, or as we move on to other roles in the organization, we have a good baseline of people who have ownership of this and they view it as their line, their equipment. And really it helps us sustain results as we continue to move forward. So one of the other key things behind just engaging them and seeking input from them was really they had a key role in this too on another side, which is help us standardize, as you've heard a few times today, standardize our documents and our standards that we were going to use moving forward to run this new equipment. So I know this is kind of an eye chart, but I just want, these are some examples of some of the key things that they helped do throughout the different aspects of the project. So they created our quality documentation and check sheets that we use to ensure we're making good product. What we consider CILTs are now we're considering operator standard work. Key things that are very basic preventive maintenance type activities to make sure the equipment stays in a pristine condition and good running order. One of our biggest documents that we believe in is our setline processes. So how do we set, every time we change from this format to that format, how do we ensure that equipment is set up exactly where it needs to be to take off and run versus to make a lot of minor adjustments as we make those changeovers. We also define very clear changeover procedures. So again, when we make a format change or a size change, what exactly, like you saw in the live demonstration out here, what's the exact step we want to follow to make sure everyone's doing that exact same process every time and consistently. And then again, just the generic standard operating procedures, every other task that we have to perform. So again, if I scroll back one slide, this team was responsible for that and actually built that basically independent, and then we would make changes so that we move forward. So, engage, new technology, we engaged the team. So what was the result? At the end of the day, as Andy mentioned, we have to spend that money wisely and get a return on that investment. So at a very high level, how did that project and that technology with the do? Well, from a flexibility standpoint, there's no question about it. We went from the ability to run 3 very generic sizes to basically infinite sizes. Today we do 10 different formats. From a robot redundancy or reliability, just in general equipment reliability standpoint, we would lose just in that dough during those changeovers around $300,000 a year, which today we avoid. So pretty good financial savings there. From a scrap rate, we have an improvement on our scrap rate from pre-project to post-Crayola of about 42%. Absolute, in terms of scrap, we've had a $3 million absolute zero-based loss swing pre to post-project, and our efficiency has gone up on those lines about 15%. So pretty good results. And again, the only way we sustain those results is leveraging the people to continue to drive those, to sustain that technology change and drive those results. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Greer, the plant technical manager.
All right, guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about reliability and your reliability programs and the journey that we've started in the Charlotte site. I think the reliability program, people think about, maintenance, turning wrenches, nuts and bolts and things like that. I'll tell you that our journey started with relationship building. And what had happened over the time and the 50-plus years that the bakery's been there, our operations teams and our reliability teams had done a really good job of building some pretty good walls between each other. And, we didn't have shared goals. We didn't have a lot of the relationships that we needed. We weren't aligned on direction. And so I'll tell you the single most important building block that we started with was establishing some ownership and some relationships so that we could build on that and develop trust and realize that we can win as a reliability team, but if our operations team loses, we didn't win as an organization, and vice versa. The operations team, you got to win and lose together, basically. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the processes that we've used. And what you're seeing right here, guys, this is vintage 1985. I'd love to be able to tell you, man, we at Snyder's-Lance have come up with the next best technology when it comes to reliability, but we're going right back to the basics, and we're being very foundational and fundamental in our approach. This is a reliability pyramid, something I was introduced to my career 20 years ago when I was first out of school and things like that. And what we're focused on is right here at the bottom and the very foundation of the pyramid. We're early in our journey, and the things that we're focused on are the foundational fundamentals that have been around for an awful long time when it comes to building a reliability program in a plant. Things like our CMMS system or computerized maintenance management systems that we use for documenting our processes, our procedures, our PM routines, things like that. It's our planning and scheduling processes, work execution and review. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail on the next slides, but we really are very foundational and fundamental in our approach. So after we agreed on relationships and tearing down the wall, we started working on, our teams that are out there, our reliability teams. And to be honest with you, it started with setting some expectations. I got a couple of pictures that I've got here on this slide. That the first one, not one I'm proud of, but this is who we were. And what you see there is a very good repair with tape. And I'll tell you, that was pretty common when you walked on the production floor at our bakery a few years ago. You'd see a lot of tape. You'd see a lot of cardboard, wire, things like that. They were really temporary, not sustainable. It wasn't really a repair. It was a Band-Aid. And, it really came to set expectations that we will repair things, and we will do things right, and we'll do it right the first time. And setting that expectation. And you see now, as we've made this transformation and as we've improved our reliability, we've made those repairs permanent. We declared, hey, this is who we want to be. That we're no longer the tape and cardboard guys. We are the do it right the first time team. And we're proud of that. The next thing that we really, had to do is we had to define roles. We really lacked process and procedure. We had a misunderstanding, and I think that's where a lot of the wall building came from, a lot of misunderstanding of what it is that I expect out of my operations counterpart, what it is I expect out of my mechanics and my planners. And as a result, you have a lot of misdefined roles, and you're not aligned on expectations. You create conflict. And so we started defining roles and developing standard processes. And what you have here before you is today what our planning and scheduling process, a portion of that looks like. And it just walks through simply how do we execute work within our site and what everybody's roles are within that work execution. And so it defines how work order, how work actually happens. And in doing that, we also built our process and established the workflow and how everything works there. Another fundamental foundational block is planning and scheduling. That's the biggest area that we've really spent probably the most time on as we've established our standards and our practices, is really setting up that planning team so that when a mechanic gets that work order, he has a really high confidence level that he knows that he's going to have the part that he needs to accomplish that. He's going to have the time that he needs to accomplish that. He's got to have a job plan that tells him what he needs to do so that he can go out and execute that work and not spend half his night digging around in a storeroom trying to find a part that we may or may not have. It sounds, again, very fundamental, very basic, blocking and tackling type of things. But to be honest with you, it's been hugely effective. The other thing that we've really focused on is PMs, and I shouldn't say PMs, it's KPIs and metrics. The one that I've got up here as an example is right out of our site-based trend. This is our PM completion that we have for the bakery, and I picked one that's got a nice green positive line there for you to show. But along with the metrics, I wanted to highlight one of the key things, and you heard Andy talk about it earlier, and that's establishing that ownership. And we work together to make sure we're establishing KPIs and metrics that are shared. So they're not just things that the reliability team cares about, they're things that our operations teams cares about. And so PMs are a good example. I can have all the job plans and all the things that are in the world that I need to go out and do that PM successfully, but if I don't have a production schedule, or I don't have the downtime, or I don't have the resources from my customers to be able to go out and do that work, I'm not going to be successful. And so by having that shared ownership of those PMs and things like that, we've really driven a positive trend. We're no longer competing, we don't have competing priorities, we're aligned on what we're doing. We've done a lot of work with our PMs. We had very generic PMs. I hate the word inspect on a PM. Inspect doesn't tell me what am I looking for and what's the definition. And so we tried to, as much as possible, quantify what we want. Is there a way to measure what you're inspecting if there is indeed inspections? Go to what we call proactives, where we know we're using the data available in our CMMS. We know how long that part's going to last and things like that. And then lastly, this is very new. We're not very deep into this, is we have evolved to the point where we can start looking at technology. Things that we're looking at and we've piloted in the site over the last 6 months are tablets. We're introducing to where the mechanic actually has a tablet on the floor and he can see his inventory, he can enter work orders and things like that on the site, seeing how that's going to work. Is that going to drive some efficiency gains for us, for our mechanics and electricians? And then lastly, predictive tools, very, again, foundational, fundamental things that we're starting in on: lubrication analysis, vibration analysis. One that's key for our industry is ultrasound, using ultrasound tools and technology to tell us when something's going to break rather than reacting whenever it breaks, and really trying to stay ahead of some of the reliability issues that we have out there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Chandler, who's going to talk to you guys about the approach we've taken to problem solving.
Again, my name is John Chandler. I'm the Continuous Improvement Manager. And for these guys that know me, I can talk about problem solving just about all afternoon, so I won't do that. But I want to point out a couple of highlights and things that we've gone over in some of our problem solving journey. But in a lot of cases, problem solving you know, until there's a problem or there's a root cause analysis that has to happen, if anybody found themselves in a situation where, all right, as long as I can get in there and prove it's not me and get out of here without any more action items, I'll be okay, right? Happens a lot, but ultimately that's not really healthy, and you don't really get to the end of the problem or to the root cause, ultimately a solution that's going to correct for that. So one of the things that we did, first off, is what are those triggers? You know, when are you going to execute, you know, an event? When are you going to get a group of people together or individually and go about solving those problems? That's very important in terms of, you know, prioritization. Who's going to do what when? You know, where do you go after that and make sure you're not trying to solve everything by the end of the day, because then ultimately you end up solving nothing. Equally important is what is that culture of trust and accountability. And the reason that's so important is because if you don't have that trust, you're going to get inaccurate information. You know, if your people don't trust you, if they're not really bought into why you're doing those things, and if they think you're going to, you know, just pound them and hammer them, right, what's the probability that they're going to open up and give you that accurate information? Pretty low. If you don't have that accurate information, then probably your analysis is going to be flawed, and if your analysis is going to be flawed, then you're probably not going to come up with the right solution. So that's very, very important, and we're going to go over a couple of examples of that. We also use a tool from Think Reliability called cause mapping, and it's pretty much a more visual 5 why, but it allows you to branch off into different areas. And one of the basic building blocks we talk about that is if you have a fire, excuse me, you need 3 things to have a fire, right? Oxygen, heat, and a fuel source. Well, if you don't have all 3 of those things, you can't have a fire. But in a lot of problem solving, everybody's trying to look for the one thing, right? It's that one thing, that one root cause, and almost always it's not. And that dovetails very well within the site-based framework in terms of people, process, technology, and discipline execution. You need all of those things working together, right, to create that system and to achieve world class. Problem solving follows that same kind of philosophy or methodology. You know, you need to understand your root cause and your effect. The other piece on that is everybody wants to jump to solutions. I don't know if everybody's seen that or has a predisposition to do that. You know, ideally you got to define the problem first, right? Then really understand what that cause and effect is. And then don't go to the solutions until you've got that cause and effect framework really laid out. There is a very handy, you know, already embedded 5 why tool within the Site-Based 360. But whatever tool that you're using, it's also very handy because you can attach documents, pictures, or whatnot in there and go back and re-reference that. Because oftentimes, if you don't have a system or a platform to reference it, right, somebody's sitting alone at their desk, writing the stuff, they put it into something, and it goes on a shared drive, or it goes on their hard drive, and what happens after that? Right? Typically nothing unless you can share it out and really get to that solution development part. So this is an example. We've got a couple of different people here, and people is the key. How do you get people from multiple aspects of that area, of that problem, right, to walk through that? And then how do you facilitate it, right? When you talk to people, when you go into that problem solving, are you doing that, you know, from a listening environment? You know, are you really curious about, you know, what those people want to say and what they have to say? Or are you going in with a preconceived notion because you think you already know the answer and you're coming up with that and you're leading people to where that goes? Now, we've got maintenance, operations, management, hourly folks, right? You can do this in a conference room, and if you got that good facilitation, it can be very, very effective in mapping out that cause and effect. But what I would say is even more important is if you can actually get to the source of the problem, right, and do it where that accident or where that incident actually occurred. So this was a very eye-opening one for us in terms of, you know, we had an accident, somebody actually got their hand kind of stuck in that piece of equipment. Not very good, right? Well, when we started talking about this, it was actually this gentleman right here. You know, we wanted to do this cause map. We brought everybody out to the situation. We had 13 people show up, right? So you see there's a lot of people there. And as a facilitator, you know, fairly loud, I mean, how's this going to work, right? Well, we all got said and done. I pulled one of the guys aside. I said, you know, how did that go? Oh, that was awesome. Okay, I really wasn't expecting to hear that because, you know, I thought it was fairly effective, but I wouldn't want to call awesome. I said, you know, why did you think that? He said, well, we had 13 people there. I said, okay, well, did you think everybody could hear? You know, did people understand the process? What was that all about? And he said, well, that wasn't it. You know, we were all there in support of Chris, you know, to support him and know that he's a valued member of our team. And even though he had an accident, we're all here to help that and correct that so it never happens again. And that's the environment of trust. That's the environment of sharing that you want to go after in building that. And in this particular instance, you know, it was a safety issue, and you know, one of the people about lack of guarding, right? Does anybody else have guarding issues in their facility, old equipment, whatnot? I mean, that was the first thing somebody said, and we know we need to guard it. We need to put guards all over it. Okay, great. Second person said, it's a piece of junk equipment. We need to scrap it, build, get a new piece of equipment in here. Okay, that's one option. Somebody else said, well, you know, obviously, actually Chris himself said, I was hurrying. I didn't know what to do. You know, hurrying out, I was shuffling too much, and we had to get it done because it was the time of the changeover. Okay. Another person said, well, geez, if you couldn't get your finger in there in the first place, right, it wouldn't, you know, if you can't get your finger in where it got stuck, it's not going to have an accident. And the person right next to him said, you know, that thing comes down pretty fast. If it came down slower, right, you wouldn't have the accident either. And the guy next to him said, well, geez, you know, if we put a spacer in there and shorten the gap, and we put an air pressure regulator on that airline, it would come down real slow. So it'd be even harder to put your finger in there. And even if you did, it's coming down slow enough that, you know, it's not going to cause an accident in the first place. So basically that's what we did, right? It cost us about $30, you know, and an air regulator and some spare parts that we had in the shop. So we didn't guard the hell out of it. We didn't buy a new piece of equipment, right? And was our safety manager upset that we didn't guard it? No, why? Because we're preventing that incident from happening again. Did the person that wanted a new piece of equipment, was he unhappy because we didn't spend a bunch of capital? No, because his coworker, right, solved the solution, and we know that's not going to happen again. So argue we would have not gotten there without the employee engagement, without the trust, and without getting everybody involved in that situation. So I would challenge everybody here to think about that in your environments. The other thing from a problem-solving perspective that's really been a big cultural change for us is not only are you solving problems with that, right? How you doing a root cause failure analysis, but how you do a root cause success analysis. You know, when things go right in your area and you have a really good day, most often people go, whew, that was great, you know, go back into it and go back in the fight the next day. But if you really think about it, your cause and effect is the same whether or not you had a problem or a deviation from target, right, or something went really, really well. Your cause and effect process and your logic behind that is exactly the same. And if you get people involved in a root cause success analysis versus the root cause failure, people are thinking about that in a much more positive way, but they're also thinking about cause and effect. And ultimately, if they can do that, they're going to be making better decisions on the shop floor, right, in advance of that condition or in advance of that problem. So that's my soapbox. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andy.
All right. So I like to use this picture to symbolize kind of where we were before we started our journey. So we talked a lot about people. We talked a lot about some of the processes we're doing. We talked about our technology transformation. And leader standard work, simply put for us, was that rigor, that routine, and that sustainability piece to keep a lot of the programs that we're talking about moving forward. And it was also a foundation for us to bring in more CI improvements, CI tools later on in our journey. So, many of us are at a crossroads, right? We've all been at this point in our career at some time where we're frustrated with results. Where do we go? And we know we have to do something different. We got to move in the direction of productivity, results, and we've got to do it the right way. So how do we do it? What did we do? And I go back to this chaos picture. This was us before we started to implement standard work, before we started to hold ourselves accountable for routines and coaching team members. What do we have? We had a lot of chaos. We had lack of good standards. So we've all probably had this at our career in one time or another, where first shift does it different from second shift, who does it different from third shift. And we all blame each other and blame each different shift for the results and who set what up. We just didn't have that. We had lack of standards. We had lack of clarity on roles and responsibilities. Matt talked a little bit about that with reliability and operations. We had the same thing with our team members on the floor. Who did what and when, and how did we do it? Lack of ownership of process, and we're going to circle around with this, is, again, if you don't have process defined, nobody owns it. Nobody goes after it. Nobody tries to improve it. And we had lots of competing priorities. And this, I'll raise my hand because I probably created that, a little bit of a type A production personality. You want results, you want them now, and, you want to get everything done by tonight. Lack of coaching, just checking the box. So a lot of things that we check and take for granted every day, whether it's a metric, whether it's a metric out on the floor on a wrapper or a piece of equipment, are we just checking the box to make sure it's okay? Or are we finding out with our team why it's okay? And if it's not, how do we coach and change directions? How do we do that? We weren't doing that. It was just an activity. It was check the box, go back into the office, all as well. Our key indicators, our KPIs, were siloed. So when you think about our organization, we talked about that value stream. We have a mixing department who sends dough to a cutting and oven department who forms it and bakes it, and they send it to the packaging department. So our goals were set up where what makes mixing successful? What makes cutting and oven successful? What makes packaging successful? Not what makes the value stream successful. So we were, to Matt's point, we didn't have those shared metrics, and we had a lot of conflict almost every day around that type of stuff. We were professional firefighters. So do you ever get out there on a piece of equipment and you put your head down into it and you're working on it, and you peek your head up out of the clouds, and all of a sudden 8 hours has gone by and you have no idea where you are on planning, you have no idea where you are on changeovers or where you're at for the whole day. That happened quite a bit, and we missed a lot of stuff along the way. Sustainment was difficult because we did not have a routine. We didn't create standards. So anytime we got a burst of improvement, we would fall back again and again. So how do we do that? A couple of things that I highlighted there that we're going to talk about as I show examples is the lack of good standards, clarity of roles, lack of ownership in a process, and these KPIs, because those are big keys to moving us forward in success. So how do we start to create leader standard work? And leader standard work is the phrase that we chose. Operator standard work, center lines, anything that you put under that could be standard work for us. So, we started out with creating what we call critical task or daily routines. How do we do that? We identified what was critical to the positions or the process. So we peeled back the onion all the way from our team members up to a plant manager role. What was important to check every day? What was important to coach around every day so we could coach behaviors and build sustainable process? Again, our plant was, like I said earlier, our plant was built on tribal knowledge. So list those critical daily, weekly, monthly activities, again, all the way from our team members up to the plant manager. We clarified roles and responsibilities. So now we understand what a packaging operator does. Now we understand what a mechanic does and things of that nature, all the way up through our different roles. So we improved the coaching and the engagement on the floor. So we talked about a little bit in the previous slide about checking the box. So what do we change when we go out on the floor? I'm going to give you an example, a great example. I had an interaction with an operator named Sherry Howie. So I was out there in our line 3 packaging system, and we had just implemented our standard work and went through a lot of training on our rejects. So if we have a light weight, the checkweigher kicks it off. If we have a high weight above a certain tolerance, our checkweigher kicks it off. And she was having a lot of rejects, and I went out there and I said, Sherry, you got 1,000 rejects. What's going on? Is there something we can do to help? Is there something that, we could train on to improve that? And I got her really thinking about that. And then the next day, it's probably around 3:30 p.m., she came into my office, charged into my office, and said, Andy, I'm going to tell you what. I only have 200 rejects today, and I'll tell you why, because yesterday when you came out there, I looked at it, I fixed this, and I couldn't fix this, but I got a mechanic over there, and he took care of that for me, and now we're back in sustainable results. So she came in. That's how powerful just going out and coaching and having that conversation is with your team to drive it forward, to get them thinking about the right things. Giving the team the ability to change course within a shift. So I talked a little bit about putting your head down in that equipment, trying to fix a problem, troubleshooting it, right, riding in to save the day, and before you know it, the whole day's gone, and you don't know where you were. So if you're not just checking the box, if you're having those coaching scenarios out there on the floor with your team, you have the ability to change direction. Okay, if I'm doing a performance walk, and a performance walk is that walking around, checking and coaching key indicators that drive the business, if I'm doing that on a regular basis, I can catch things and move the business forward every day. Kind of a short interval control type of process to continue to drive results. So what does it look like for us just on a day-to-day type of execution standpoint? I want to talk about a couple things that are very powerful, and Scott mentioned this and Rob mentioned this in the earlier presentations around a power walk and a performance walk. So what is a power walk for us? So I talked a little bit about, I'm blaming second shift, and I'm blaming third shift, and I'm blaming first shift for a lot of our issues. So what our team leaders do today and our operators do today is that power walk. So prior to a shift, a team leader will come in and walk with their peer from the previous shift and walk through their entire responsibilities to understand what happened through that day. That verbal conversation, they're checking out to see if the work areas were left in a good place, right? So I can no longer say first shift left me with a mess, because I own that, and I had to have that discussion with my peer and that coaching with my peer. It's not up to me to go back to the operations manager to say, hey, so-and-so left me with a mess. My expectation is to coach that with my peer or coach that with the team members out there on the floor. So what's that do? It starts to build trust. It starts to build relationships, and it starts to build expectations from peer to peer, and it helps get things cleaned up. One of the other pieces that we do every day is what we call a performance walk. So it's on a regular routine, whether it's every 2 hours in some departments or every 3 hours, where we're walking that value stream. We're making sure that our customers are delivering the right results to packaging from their cakes. We're coaching them, giving them feedback, and then we're going in and we're coaching our operators. Are we good? That's outstanding. Why are we good? What's driving those good results? Are we bad? What's driving it? Let's dig in. Do we need to get resources? So if we're doing that on a routine basis, that rigor there, we're changing direction every day, right? We no longer, get to the end of the shift and we say, what happened? 8 hours went by and we're in the red for the entire day, and we can't understand why. We're getting out in front of it and trying to change directions through the shifts. You'll see a lot of other key things up there from a leader standpoint too. Let me go back to the operator one here too. A lot of things we'll talk about: center lines, checking run settings to make sure that you're at the optimal settings, things of that nature. Inspections, whether you're inspecting guards, whether you're inspecting key things that make that equipment run optimal. And what does a leader do? That leader does the same thing on a layered audit type of standpoint. Maybe not at as high frequency, but at a less frequency, but it does a lot of coaching along the way. So they're auditing the process, they're coaching the process, they're going after those things. And how do we connect that? How do we connect it with Matt's team and reliability? Writing work orders, identifying defects and raising that up. That's all part of that standard work and how we continue to do that. And really the key takeaways, for me out of this have been the performance walks and improving sustainability and performance throughout a shift, but also the power walks. So if you think about your leaders doing it, and then you think about your team members doing it, think about the trust it builds, think about that peer-to-peer accountability and conversations. There's not a lot of that happens in organizations, specifically even at the team member level. Team members don't, inherently coach each other. They're not taught to do it, but you can teach them to do it. And it can be very powerful, because I believe that peer-to-peer conversations and peer-to-peer accountability is more powerful than the boss telling you to do something. That's way more powerful in moving the business forward. So a couple key things there for us. I also want to talk about, the process and technology piece. What are we doing there? So creating standards, the how-to or the best practice. We talked about, we create a standard, and then we find a better way to do it. So we up the standard and we get better. We continue to do that type of stuff. So we're in the process right now of refurbishing every one of our standards that are out there. Any OPL or theory of operation that we have in the system, we've got technical writers now that are building that process and using the site-based technology to refresh and retrain our team members and our leaders. What else are we doing? Creating center lines, the optimal way to run a process or a piece of equipment. And this is something that we're still not good at. And we're getting good at it in some departments. Some of our new technology that's come in the door, we've done a great job with. And in some of our baking processes where we didn't have visibility on what the process should be like. You can't see the science happening in a dough, right? You can feel and touch a dough, but that's tribal knowledge, right? That's somebody with 30 years experience telling you that the dough's good or the dough's bad. So how do we center line that process? How do we create that? And what's the frequency of a check around a standard like a center line? And most importantly, what behaviors does a center line drive? So if you have a run setting and you're running at a higher setting or a higher spec in that run setting, what does that mean? Does it necessarily mean shut the piece of equipment down? Or does it mean an escalation process and a troubleshooting process to identify the root cause? Something is about to happen or will happen if we don't fix it. You know, so what do? I think about our dough process, and our dough's sitting up in a hot room, a proof room, and that's where that science and that fermentation starts to take place before we drop it and bake it. So how do we do that? So we created center lines with our what we call a hot dough or a sponge dough or a sweet dough. What does that mean? Our center line, our perfect center line is 4 hours in that room. And then we said, okay, we know it'll run pretty good at 30 minutes over or 30 minutes under, so-so. So we created an escalation process around that. If you're in the yellow or 30 minutes plus or minus, the escalation goes to the team. It doesn't mean not run it, but it means communicate through the value stream to let them know that something could potentially change. And then we start to get out further in the zones, and there's more escalation and things that need to change and troubleshooting techniques that need to happen potentially to run that process. So we started to define that and give our teams the tools to standardize troubleshooting and their process. So a couple other things. We've talked about the site-based technology today. So how do we use that technology to capture our KPIs, our trends, and our actionable tasks? I love the actionable tasks, but you know, so what does that mean for us? A couple things that we did there is we changed our goals. You know, we got out of that silo type of goal. So how do we have that customer relationship? So how does cutting an oven know that they're getting delivered the best product? Mixing now knows they're delivering that product to their customer. Cutting an oven knows now that they're delivering a product to their customer in packaging, and setting up key performance indicators that are driving that value stream metric for us, and creating trust within the system because we're doing the right thing. So just a snapshot on what we do. We have shift reviews. That's part of our standard work. So this is a snapshot from mixing. You know, we talk about a few things. Safety, great day in safety. Our center lines, plus or minus 30 minutes. What were we for the day? We were 87%. Okay, bad day. Bad day. We might have had one bad day. One bad day doesn't necessarily mean an action. We might take a look at it from, hey, do we have a trend? Are we trending down, and what's driving that? So you can see we've had a handful of red days, and what's driving that? Something with our line 4 process. So we have an action in here to go in, and whether it's to do a root cause analysis, a cause map, or maybe there's just a few things that we need to get fixed on a piece of equipment up there that will change that problem. We're documenting that when we're following up on the process. So we continue to do that. So what are the benefits of some of these things that we've seen out there? So leader standard work now is our #1 priority in the organization. We continue to talk about that every single day. And I know it's been a tough transition for a lot of folks. If you think about that picture I put up there in the beginning, frustration and productivity, a lot of us have been there in our careers. And I've worked for organizations that do advanced CI programs. And I know when I was a production manager, and we did the normal blocking and tackling execution every day, and then they started to introduce CI programs, I struggled with that. And why I internalized that, I said, I can't believe that I have to be a production manager and execute this for the organization and execute all this CI stuff. And it took me a long time to get it. Until one day when I was driving into work, I finally had that light bulb, that aha moment that I said, you know what, that day-to-day execution is important, but I'm never going to sustain results, and I'm never going to get better unless I get my mindset into the CI type of work. And the CI, whether it's actionable or culture related, I'm never going to get the organization better until I get to that point. So this work, my work now transitions from that day-to-day execution to that CI mentality. How do we improve? How do we sustain results? And I leave the rest of it behind. And a lot of leaders struggle with that. A lot of leaders struggle with letting go of that and focusing on the future. It's very tough to do, especially, you know, type A personality that wants to execute and get results every day. and win for the organization. It becomes very difficult to do that, and it's a tough transition for a lot of leaders in the organization. So how do we continue to improve? Creating standards, center lines throughout the plant, role clarity, so folks know what they're doing, our team members, our team leaders, our line leads, our coordinators, they know what they're doing, they know what their expectations are. Ownership of the process is improving. So we've changed from those siloed key performance indicators to value streams. So there's trust now, people are owning the process. We've got a playbook. So I think of every great football team that's won a Super Bowl. They have a playbook. They have a great defensive playbook. They have a great offensive playbook. Standard work is the same thing. It's the same thing as a defensive playbook. It's no different. Coaching is improvement. So that checking the box is going away. Having those conversations with your team to change results daily, that's starting to improve. Engagement is improving, as John talked about. Those conversations out on the floor, getting more people involved, bringing them into the loop on making decisions. And trust and communication, again, I go back to that, those KPIs, the value stream, and then think about, we talked about the performance walks, we talked about the power walks and what those are, and the trust it builds from peer to peer and shift to shift. That relationship will start to change if you do it effectively. So last but not least, you know, our results, what does this all mean for us as a plant? What does it mean? We're improving, and like I said in the beginning, we're not by any means experts. We see things through our lens and what we're doing. And I'll take a quote from John here, the cement's still wet. You know, we could fall back, we get into that delta dip and then we get back up and we move forward again. So the cement's still wet and we're still improving and have a long way to go in our journey. And again, using those building blocks, our vision, transformation in technology, reliability, problem solving, and then tying it all together with leader standard work and sustaining those results that we're building on. You know, and just the model, the site-based model. How do we improve, create new standards, and get better? How do we continue to do that? Same model. What does that mean for us? So in 2015, lots of improvements. So our recordable accidents, 37.5% reduction year over year through the first 6 months. Consumer complaints has been a huge win, a lot more focus. Again, where does that focus come from? It comes from that coaching. Coaching. A lot of it, you know, sometimes we like to get into a conference room and do a cause map with operators, but a lot of that can come with that coaching on the floor to change directions and results every day. So almost a 30% reduction in consumer complaints. Our fill rate, so cases filled, shipped versus ordered, up 3%. And then we take a look at our total sandwich cracker cost business. We're about 1.6 million absolute. This isn't the standard, the budget. This is absolute dollars in improvement year over year through the first 6 months. And those are the building blocks that we've used to try to move the business forward.